The night of April 17th, 1662, the people of Bury St. Edmunds barricaded their doors and shattered their windows. A traveling merchant had reported seeing figures moving through the woods at midnight 3 days prior, and the town collectively decided that something terrible was happening just beyond their sight. No one had witnessed an actual gathering. No one could name who attended, yet the fear was absolute, spreading from household to household, until the entire community operated under the assumption that witches were meeting in secret, plotting against them in the darkness. The Witches' Sabbath existed primarily in the minds of those who feared it. These supposed nocturnal assemblies where witches allegedly gathered to worship Satan, feast on unbaptized children, and conspire against Christian society were not documented events, but rather elaborate fantasies constructed from fragmented folklore, religious anxiety, and social paranoia. The Sabbath was described in confessions extracted under torture and in the writings of demonologists who never witnessed such gatherings themselves. It was a phantom that communities across Europe came to accept as reality despite the complete absence of physical evidence. This imagined threat proved more powerful than any actual conspiracy could have been. Because the Sabbath supposedly occurred in remote locations under the cover of darkness, it was unfalsified. Anyone could be attending, from your neighbor, your servant, even members of your own family might be slipping away to participate in these diabolic assemblies. The very absence of proof became evidence of how cunning and dangerous witches truly were. Communities lived in a state of perpetual vigilance, watching for signs that were never precisely defined, fearing an enemy that left no trace, creating an atmosphere where accusation required no substantiation and defense offered no safety. The Witch Sabbath began as scattered folk beliefs about nocturnal meetings and diabolic pacts, but by the 15th century it had transformed into a detailed, standardized account of organized devil worship. Local tales of women flying to remote gatherings matched with old fears about heretical sects and supposed Jewish conspiracies. Inquisitors collected these fragmented stories during interrogation and wove them into a coherent narrative that appeared across Europe with remarkable consistency. The same elements appeared in confessions from the Alps to the Pyrenees, ranging from the flight to the gathering place, the renunciation of Christ, the obscene kiss given to the devil, the feast of stolen or murdered children, the frenzied dancing, and the sexual debauchery that followed. Men like Heinrich Kramer, author of Malleus Maleficarum, and Jean Baudin, who wrote extensively on the persecution of witches, give intellectual legitimacy to what had been village gossip. They created treatises that described the Sabbath in scholarly language, complete with legal precedents and theological justifications. These demonologists presented themselves as experts documenting a genuine phenomenon rather than architects constructing a fantasy. Their works were printed and distributed, creating a reference library that judges and inquisitors consulted when conducting trials. When a suspected witch was interrogated, the questions asked were shaped by what these texts claimed happened at Sabbaths, and the answers given under duress naturally conformed to the expected narrative. The genius of the Sabbath narrative was how it channeled existing social tensions into a single, comprehensible threat. It incorporated the fear of peasant gatherings and secret assemblies that might challenge feudal authorities. It absorbed anxiety about women's sexuality and their gatherings beyond male supervision. It drew on suspicion of midwives and healers who possessed knowledge that seemed mysterious and ungodly. It transformed religious minorities and social outsiders into potential participants in a cosmic war against Christianity. The Sabbath became a catch-all explanation for misfortune, a way to make sense of crop failures, stillbirths, illnesses, and social change by attributing them to an unorganized campaign of supernatural evil. Every unexplained event could be traced back to what witches had done in the darkness while honest Christians slept. The Witch Sabbath functioned as a mechanism for enforcing conformity and eliminating those who existed at the margins of acceptable society. Communities used the threat of Sabbath attendance to police behavior, particularly among women who lived alone, spoke too freely, or possessed too much independence. Accusations often targeted the elderly, the poor, those who practiced folk medicine, and anyone who had ongoing disputes with their neighbors. The imagined ritual created a binary. You were either a God-fearing Christian or a participant in diabolical conspiracy. There was no middle ground. This framework gave communities permission to turn on their most vulnerable members under the guise of spiritual warfare, transforming personal grievances and economic tensions into cosmic battles between good and evil. The structure of Sabbath-related panic established a template that would repeat throughout history. The pattern was consistent: an invisible network of enemies supposedly working in secret, their meetings held beyond public view, their members indistinguishable from ordinary citizens until revealed through investigation or confession. The conspiracy was always vast enough to justify extreme measures, but nebulous enough that it could never be fully eradicated. Each new accusation validated the existence of the threat, and the lack of concrete evidence was reframed as proof of how deeply the conspiracy had infiltrated society. This model proved remarkably durable because it required no factual basis to function effectively as a tool of social control. Contemporary society continues to generate panics that follow this same architecture. The satanic ritual abuse hysteria of the 1980s and the 1990s replicated the Sabbath narrative almost exactly, complete with accusations of organized devil worship, ritual child abuse, and the vast networks of conspirators hiding in plain sight. Moral panics about immigrant communities, religious minorities, and political opponents frequently invoke the specter of secret gatherings where outsiders plot against the social order. The language changes, but the mechanics remain identical. An unseen threat, a shadowy organization, meetings held beyond the reach of decent society, and the identification of a vulnerable or marginalized group as a source of inexplicable evil. The Witch Sabbath demonstrated how effectively societies could be mobilized against an imaginary enemy, and that lesson has been applied repeatedly across centuries whenever those in power needed to redirect anxiety, consolidate authority, or eliminate those who threatened the established hierarchy. Thank you for watching. Until the next one.